Are cloth seats better than leather? Is an open diff better than a limited slip diff? Is a soft top better than a hard top? The answers to these questions may not be as straightforward as you think, at least for one of these. Hello and welcome back to Flywheel Films. My name is Austin, and if you somehow missed my last couple of videos, I recently bought my very first NC Miata. I ended up with a pretty unique spec, and it was not at all by accident. I have learned a ton about the NC platform over the last couple months and quite honestly years of research. There are a lot of nuances between the various sub-generations of NC, and my goal with this video is to give you a quick and easy guide as to what those differences are and which ones you should pay attention to. So before we get into it, fair warning, we're going to get very much into the weeds of specifically the third generation Miata today. But if you are in the market for an NC, consider this Buyer's Guide Part 1, a guide to the sub-generations. So before we jump into the differences, let's lay some groundwork so if you're not familiar, you can get acquainted with the NC. The NC is the third generation Miata, and it is split into three sub-generations: the NC1, the NC2, and the NC3. The NC1 ran from 06 to 08, the NC2 ran from 2009 to 2012, and the NC3 ran from 2013 to 2015. So as you can tell, the NC was for sale for quite a while, from 06 to 2015. That's why it got so many mid-cycle refreshes, and there are a lot of things to cover with all of those changes over the years. Throughout the various sub-generations of the NC, there are some constants. For example, the Sport is the base trim in pretty much every year but 06. The Touring is the mid trim, and the Grand Touring is the top trim. In 2006, there was a little bit of weird stuff going on, but you could get a LSD and a 6-speed in a Sport, where that wasn't something you could do in any of the later years of the NC. There are also some trims that are a little less common, like the limited edition and the special edition. There were a few of these available throughout the various sub-generations of NC, and think of them as everything you could want. That's why Jordan got his 2012 NC Miata, because it is a special edition, so it has limited slip differential, it's got a 6-speed, it's got leather seats, heated seats, Bose sound system, power retractable hardtop. It is everything you could ask for in an NC. The only other unique trim is the Club. The Club is a bit unique because it's kind of the most performance-oriented NC. It has a limited slip diff, a 6-speed, handling package, all of the stuff you want if you want to buy a car to drive fast and enjoy in the canyons, but it does not have leather or heated seats, no special sound system. It's pretty bare bones outside of the drivetrain improvements. So a good way to think about the trims is the starting place for the NC. A lot of the lower trim level cars either could not or typically did not have some of the more desirable packages equipped. That's not always a bad thing, we'll get into that here in a bit. But for example, the Touring and the Grand Touring could have the handling package equipped, and the Sport could not. And the handling package is what gives you things like the limited slip diff and the Bilstein struts. So these are all things to take into consideration, and it's good to understand what the different trims are before you go shopping. Also, so you know my bias, I have of course a NC1. I have a 2006 Touring in winning blue. Like I said, 06 was a little bit of a weird year, so my Touring is essentially a base model car. I have cloth seats, I have a 5-speed instead of a 6-speed, I have an open differential, it's a soft top. You might be wondering, man, you really didn't get a whole lot of good stuff. Why did you buy that car? There are some reasons as to why. I'll kind of hit those as I touch on the things you should be looking at. But let's start with the exterior. The exterior saw a lot of changes over the years. I think most notably the front bumper changed with every sub-generation. The NC1, in my opinion, is the happiest and the most bulbous front bumper. It's most reminiscent of the NA and the NB to me, which is why it has a soft spot. I had an NA years ago, and I really like the kind of the happy, grinning look of the NC1. The NC2 got a little bit more angular and aggressive, and then the NC3 is extremely aggressive and mean looking, but a lot of people really like this kind of more aggressive look, and they are extremely popular because of that. That being said, don't let a front bumper totally sway your decision on what NC is right for you, because if you do find an NC1 that's perfect but you prefer an NC2 or an NC3 front bumper, they can be swapped on. Of course, they'll have to be paint matched, and another consideration is the headlights. The NC1 has slightly different headlights than the NC2 and the NC3, but you can just get a 3D printed spacer to fill the gap between the bumper and the headlights. Outside of the front bumper, of course, color is a very noticeable difference between the various subgenerations. There are some colors that can be found in every subgeneration: white, black, gray, red, but there are some more special colors that you can only find in specific subgenerations or even a single year. Winning blue, like my 2006, is a single year color. My favorite NC color outside of winning blue is competition yellow, and that's an 09 only color. In my opinion, the NC1 had probably the best color palette of all of the subgenerations. It had some great greens available, some great blues. I love sunlight silver on the NC1. But that being said, color is extremely subjective, so whatever you like, go buy. But if you really love a color on an NC2, it may not be available on an NC1 or an NC3. There are a few other subtle differences on the exterior. One of them is taillights. The NC1 has very kind of early thousands Fast and Furious style taillights with clear lenses and some chrome on the inside. Over the years, they definitely got a little bit more modern with a more red lens. I totally understand why some people like that more modern look, but similar to the front bumper, I really enjoy that kind of like period correct look, and I think the taillights on my NC1 are kind of fun. So a lot of these aesthetic differences have assigned value. That's just subjective value based on what you're looking for. There are some changes that I think have a little bit more objective value. Let's jump into those. So there are 3 different transmission options available on the NC. There's a 5-speed, a 6-speed, both of those are manual, and there's a 6-speed automatic. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the automatic transmission. That's primarily because they're a little bit less desirable, and in my personal opinion, if you're buying an NC or really any Miata for that matter, I think a manual is the way to go. Now, no hate to the automatic transmission folks out there. Of the 3 cars in my garage, 2 of them are automatic, and for good reason. I only like rowing gears when it's enjoyable to do so. But like I said, I'm going to focus a lot more on the manual transmissions here because there's a little bit more following for those. So like I said, my car is a 5-speed. There is a 6-speed option available. Jordan's NC2 is actually a 6-speed. And as far as driving experience, I think they're very similar. From driving Jordan's car to driving my car, there's not a crazy amount of difference in shifter feel. However, some folks tend to like the 5 speeds more for driving in traffic or lower speed autocross events. Something where you don't have to be shifting between first and second and third all the time. That being said, other people like the 6-speed because it is, I think, a little bit more robust, but also can be better for some higher speed track days. Some also argue that if you bought a manual, you bought it so you could row gears. Isn't that a perk of it? Shouldn't you own a 6-speed for that reason? I don't really know how I feel 100% on this topic yet. I am really enjoying my 5-speed so far, but Jordan 6-speed is great too. I think this is entirely personal preference, except there's one other thing to know about the 5-speed. The 5-speed cannot be had with a limited slip diff. A limited slip diff is only available on a 6-speed car, so if a limited slip diff is a big deal to you, definitely keep that in mind. But 6-speed does not necessarily mean it has a limited slip diff. The Touring and the Grand Touring trim levels could be equipped with a handling package. Handling package has things like limited slip diff and yellow Bilstein struts. The yellow Bilsteins are a dead giveaway of a handling package, but if you really want that limited slip diff and you don't want to just look at a shot color to tell you whether or not you have it, you can do a few things. You can jack the car up, and if you spin one of the rear wheels and the other one is not spinning with it, it's an open diff car. I think the best way to do it though is you can actually contact Mazda directly with your VIN, and they will give you the original window sticker with all of the packages that were equipped on your car. I think that's the easiest way to do it, as you don't need to check the car up into the air, and it will also tell you any of the other packages that were equipped to your car that you might be curious about. Now, if you're not sure what a limited slip diff is, I'm not going to go into the detail of that, but it essentially allows for a little bit more control under hard cornering and spirited driving. This is a very desirable feature that a lot of people want in their Miata, but it isn't a crazy difficult job to do yourself. It can be a little pricey though. Similar to the LSD, there are some other factory options that can affect the driving experience, but not all are hardware. Some are software. The NC has a dynamic stability control that is available, from what I understand, on Grand Tourings. It is not something that is automatically equipped to all of them, but from what I understand, it's equipped to most of them. My Touring from 06 does not have dynamic stability control, and some people would be in favor of that. I know other folks that have really enjoyed having the DSC on their car, as it can get them out of a hairy situation in a canyon drive, or keep them from losing their tail and spinning around in the wet. However, I do know that there were some improvements made to the DSC system from the NC1 to the NC2, so if you do really want that electronic nanny, I would recommend getting an NC2 or later, as the NC1's DSC system, from what I understand, is extremely intrusive. However, there's not a tremendous amount of information about DSC out there, so if you have any other information or I'm wrong about any of this, please put some info down in the comments for everybody who's curious. So aside from transmission and differential, there were some drivetrain improvements made with the NC2 that are probably less noticeable, but definitely more important. The 2-liter MZR in the NC got an overhaul for the NC2 and has some forged internals. These internals mean they are a little bit beefier and can handle a little bit more power. So if you plan on doing any type of forced induction to your car like a turbo or a supercharger, a lot of people definitely recommend grabbing an NC2 or an NC3, as these motors can take a little bit more from the factory. That being said, Jordan's first NC was an NC1 of 2007, and when he sold it, it had 250,000 miles on it, and it was still running very strong on the original motor. I think if you have some aspirations to add forced induction and crank up the power on your Miata, I would probably go for an NC2, but if you're looking for just a weekend fun car, I think an NC1 is probably going to be perfectly acceptable. I don't know a lot of stories about NC1s just exploding, so if you're looking for a fun car and you're like, oh, it doesn't have the forged internals, I wouldn't have that be a deal breaker for you unless you know you have some big power goals down the line. Also, engine swaps are definitely a thing on the NC platform. The most common engine swap is a 2.5 liter swap. The 2.5 liter was also co-developed with Ford. It is a motor that pretty much drops in where the 2-liter MZR goes, and it is a cheap motor swap, especially compared to things like a K-swap. So keep that in mind. If you want to swap your motor to get a little bit more power, NC1 is probably the way to go, as they will be a little bit cheaper than the NC2 or the NC3. So let's make our way to the interior. I think first we should talk about seats, as I bought cloth seats and a lot of people are confused as to why I really wanted cloth seats, but let's talk a little bit about leather. I am a huge fan of leather seats. Both of my other cars, my Acura TSX wagon and my GX470, have tan leather seats. However, the NC Miata, especially the NC1, doesn't have a reputation for using the best leather. Over time, these leather seats can get very hard, sometimes they can even shrink, making them a little less comfortable to sit in. After sitting in Jordan's seats a lot in his NC2 Special Edition, and now sitting in my seats for quite a bit, my cloth seats in my NC1, I think the cloth might be a little bit more comfortable. That being said, leather is definitely a lot easier to clean, and if you do get leather seats in an NC, that typically means you have heated seats as well, which is a huge perk if you're driving your car in colder months. There is no feeling like having the top down with it being 40-45 degrees out, a little bit chilly, but having the heat going and the heated seats on. I absolutely love that, and I plan to add heated seats to my car for that reason, but I really didn't want leather, so if you're curious, that is definitely something to look out for. Go sit in both and let me know what you think. Also, another slight change made to the seats over the years is in 08, some height adjustability was added. For me, I'm about 6 feet tall. I fit really well in my car as it is. I don't need any height adjustment, but if that's something that you're concerned about, find something '08 or later, or buy an '06 and throw some '08 seats in there. The interior did see some other changes over the years. I think most notably, the center console and the door panels got updated for the NC2. They're slightly more ergonomic. They have better storage solutions in them, and especially on the door cards, the cup holder doesn't get in the way of your leg, which a lot of people really hate about the NC1 door card. So a little less noticeable, but very important for some, is the key fob. For me, I wanted a physical key. So I have a switchblade style key, but it still has some buttons on the key fob for locking, unlocking, and trunk release. Different trim levels have different things available here, but if you got a higher trim level NC, you could still get a keyless option, really from any year, 06 to 2015. That being said, the NC1 keyless system is known to fail, so keep that in mind. Lastly, let's talk about tops. You might be asking yourself, should I try to track down a hard top? Should I buy a soft top? Should I buy a PRHT? What is a PRHT? Well, the PRHT is a power retractable hardtop, and this is a top unique to the NC. I think this is a extremely cool option and probably best for most people. Now you might be saying, Austin, the NDRF is a thing. It's the fourth generation Miata with a retractable fastback. That is cool, but it's not the entire roof collapsing. It's just the top little panel folding back. The PRHT is the whole roof collapsing into typically where the soft top would go. I think it's extremely cool that Mazda was able to design something and engineer something that is a hard top that collapses in pretty much the same area as the soft top. You still have a complete trunk. And I think there's a ton of upsides. Some of those are, it's better in the weather. It's definitely a little bit more durable. Obviously, it is not cloth, so it does a little bit better in rain. It's quieter on the highway. I will say my soft top compared to Jordan's PRHT, below 50 miles an hour, not a crazy big difference, but when you actually get up to those highway speeds, it's definitely an improvement to the soft top. And then, of course, you don't have to deal with the dreaded top replacement. It is very expensive and very difficult to replace the soft top. The power retractable hardtop doesn't need that. It is a failure point. It is a mechanism that can break, but from what I've seen, the NC's mechanism is actually pretty good and pretty bulletproof. So there's a lot of pros there for the PRHT. You might be wondering, Austin, why should I get a soft top when the PRHT is a thing? It's very valid. I think for a lot of people, the PRHT is the better option, like I said before. But there are some drawbacks. The one that I saw most frequently is the clear coat can fail on the top and on the cover that kind of covers the top when it's down. I don't know why that is, but it's across all generations. A lot of these roofs have clear coat that just gives out. So you can wrap it. It's not a crazy difficult thing to do, but that is one thing to be mindful of. Another is looks. When the top is up, I think it looks pretty good, especially compared to a soft top. But when the top is down, there is a little bit of an added hump on the rear of the car. The side profile on a soft top, to me, is better looking than the side profile on a power retractable hardtop. And the last thing you need to consider is whether or not you want to track your car. To start, the PRHT is definitely a little bit heavier than the soft top. Not by a lot, but I think it's something like 60 or 80 pounds. And then another thing is roll bar options. So with the soft top, you can fit a lot more roll bar options, and there are a lot of tracks that require convertibles to have a roll bar, even if it's a retractable hardtop convertible. Because the PRHT is a little bit bulkier, these roll bars can't get quite as high, and if you need to pass the broomstick test, that can be a problem. If you're not familiar with the broomstick test, they essentially just put a broomstick from the top of your windshield to your roll bar, and if your helmet gets in the way, you can be in trouble. So please note that this does vary based on track or event. So if you're curious, I would contact them directly and ask them what their rules are relating to convertibles. Wow, that was a crazy amount of information. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I know we got extremely nerdy with the NC stuff, but if you appreciated it, please let me know by leaving a comment or leaving a thumbs up down below. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. We're quickly approaching 10K subs, and with my new car and Jordan's Turbo NC, there is a lot happening. So subscribe, don't miss a video.